I'm Joey.T.Cartoon.P, and you're watching the Cartoon Palooza. I made a New Year's resolution that, surprisingly, I still managed to keep, which was to watch every animated, mainstream, wide-release movie that came out in theaters. Now, I figured to show that I'm a man of my word, I put it at a countdown showing which ones were my favorite and which ones were the worst. In a year where we got to see the Queen of Darkness and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles get the live-action treatment, I could say it was a pretty good year for animated films. Well, not that there were just good movies that came out this year, but that there was a balance between good and bad films that didn't make it feel one-sided. Therefore, before I begin talking about the good films, I may as well get the bad ones out of the way. Which is to say, you might already have a feeling which movie would make the top of my list, but I digress. As a reminder, these lists will be comprised of mainstream, widely released animated movies. So chances are you're not going to see a movie like Song of the Sea or The Tales of Princess Kaguya. Unfortunately, I just didn't have the resources to see those films. So with that said, let's go ahead and relive the pain of watching some pretty bad movies. Here are the worst animated films of 2014. I had a hard time figuring out which one to put on this part of the list, seeing that it was pretty forgettable, but it was also pretty well animated. So it was on the verge of not making it, but at the end of the day, I just found this movie to be uninteresting and forgettable. That film, Rio 2. It's still well animated with bright colors and form that we've come to expect from Blue Sky Animation. The songs are upbeat and we get to see Jermaine from Flight of the Conchords reprise his role for the first film. Though, this brings me to one of the problems of the film. The film tries to cram too much with very little. It's like a bad Spider-Man movie, where they try to cram so many characters and side plots that makes it feel cluttered and incoherent. One minute, it's about going on vacation to the Amazon. Then, it's about a Meet the Parents knockoff. Then, there's the contrived villain getting revenge subplot. All the while, they manage to throw in some forced environmental message. If anything, it just shows how much I hate when Blue Sky is forced to make a successful film into a franchise. Just look at what they did to Ice Age. Here's to hoping that this is the last we get to see the Rio gang. Unless the box office numbers look good, then I'm gonna have to suffer again. Now here I am. I was giving DreamWorks the benefit of the doubt. They had a solid film with the movie Dragons 2, and for as mediocre as Peabody and Sherman was, it really wasn't that bad. So with that all said, they had to make this stupid spin-off of the Madagascar movies. That film, Penguins of Madagascar. I know a lot of people have pointed out that they did enjoy this stupid flick because it was funny. For that, I understand humor is subjective. There may have been, I'd say, one or two jokes that made me chuckle because it involved making fun of themselves, but when you really get down to it, it really makes you question where the line is from guilty pleasure to just bad movie. When the story, plot, character, and animation is evaluated, it just feels lazy. Just like Rio 2, there's no need to see these characters brought back for another movie. They're just not interesting enough to hold the movie together, despite the fact that these characters are the fan favorites. I kinda love how this movie points out people's love for penguins while manipulatingly using this as a selling point for the movie. They try to throw every joke and the kitchen sink into this stinker. You have a character who makes celebrity puns for no distinguishable reason. At least in the Cloudy movies, they have a good way of working the food puns in because it involves giant falling food. Here, an octopus is saying things that sound like celebrity names. Gee, when was the last time we've seen a DreamWorks animated character make a celebrity pun? Muscle Crow! Now I know that people have pointed out to me that this is a sequel to a movie that's actually qualitatively worse than this one. But I never really got a chance to see that movie, and for what I saw, Planes 2, Fire and Rescue still sucks. Again, just like the last two films I mentioned, there's no reason for this film to exist. The Cars franchise from Pixar started off okay, and suddenly resulted into this spin-off series brought to us from Disney Toon Studios. I think some of the effort is shown in some of the effects, and their willingness to have characters go through an emotional arc. Though, willingness does not mean it works right, and it still turns out the main protagonist as voiced by Dane Cook is still an unlikable nincompoop, who ends up getting what he wants despite not doing the work he needs. Through questionable motives from other characters that only exist to move the plot along, this turns out to be a pretty sad attempt at making a movie out of a barrel-scraping franchise. What really kills the Planes film is how its dialogue was mostly comprised of bad puns. Which I guess makes sense since it's a world of automobiles, but it still feels like a cheap cry for humor. How about this for a pun? Crash and burn, huh? This thing on? Hello? Chances are not a lot of people saw this film, but it's been in pre-production for years, it got a wide release, so it still counts. That film, Legends of Oz. In a strange twist, this movie has jumped right up to being the worst animated film on other people's lists. Well, maybe it's my willingness to see that there was some effort put into it, but not enough to say it's the outright worst of the year. Unfortunately, folks, that don't make it a good movie. It's still a bad film with mediocre animation and a contrived plot that seems recycled from any 80s animated fantasy film. But with the good voice acting choices and... nah, wait, that's the only thing this movie has going for it. Truth be told, it has every right to be right up there as being technically worse than the other films mentioned. It's a bad movie, plain and simple. But not as bad as the movie that made the #1 spot. I don't think there's much else to say about this one. It's a bad movie that reeks of producer meddling with the inclusion of Psy. Freaking Psy in a movie set in the 1950s. You have an unlikable character, a plot that don't go nowhere or know where it's going, and some really bad toilet humor that offends the concept of the word humor. I already talked about this film in detail, so if you'd like to see my reaction, let me use this clip. And these were the worst films to come out in 2014. I mean, these films sucked the life out of me, but thankfully, there were better films to come. As next week, I'll be counting off the best animated films of 2014. Again, wide release and mainstream films. So if you had a worst film that you saw in theaters that came out last year, comment and let me know in the comments section. Now I'm Joey Tedesco, and thanks for watching this countdown on the Cartoon Palooza.